And Apple supported Epic's cross-platform play between different players on iOS and non-iOS devices, correct?
Yes.
And Apple supported cross-wallet transactions between different transaction platforms, via the App Store transaction platform or the Xbox transaction platform or some other, correct?
Apple policy allowed cross-wallet transactions so long as you made all of those items that were available elsewhere available on iOS.
So in other words, if you could buy it elsewhere and also buy it on the App Store, Apple was fine if people purchased it elsewhere, correct?
Correct.
That could be used, by Fortnite players within the iOS environment, correct?
Yes.
So throughout the entire time that Fortnite was on iOS, players could buy V-Bucks on one platform and spend those V-Bucks on their iOS device, correct?
With respect to the non-Apple platforms, which allow that, yes.
And when they did that, of course, and by that, when a player did that, Apple would not receive any commission from Epic, correct?
Correct.
And yet those V-Bucks would be spent by the player on the iOS device, correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that only certain platforms permitted this. So Apple permitted it, but not all others, correct?
Correct.
And by this, I mean specifically cross-platform and cross-wallet play. Did you understand that?
Yes.
And Sony did not permit cross-platform play on the PlayStation for over a year after the launch of Fortnite, correct?
That's right.
And you got pretty aggressive with Sony in an attempt to get them to agree, correct?
Yes, we had significant negotiations throughout 2018.
Sir, I believe you have your exhibit binder before you, and Your Honor, I'd like to show the witness exhibit 3125, DX 3125. And Mr. Sweeney, when you have that before you, please let me know.
I'm here.
And do you recognize this as an email string that you had with Mr. Phil Rosenberg at Sony?
Yes.
And this is an email exchange, it looks like over the weekend of June 2nd and 3rd, 2018. Do you see that?
I believe it begins on Friday, June 1st.
I appreciate that. I think you're right, sir. And, Your Honor, I would move exhibit DX 3125 into evidence.
Any objection? The only objection, Your Honor, is as to the portions not written by Mr. Sweeney because they're hearsay. If they're being offered for a non-hearsay use, then there would be no objection.
It's simply been offered as correspondence and communications between these two gentlemen. Obviously, Mr. Sweeney's statements are a party admission. As for Mr. Rosenberg, you're not offering them for the truth.
Admitted on that basis.
Your Honor, I apologize for the objection that included the 80 people switched over to our site to publish.
Okay.
So should I wait or should I continue?
It'll just take a minute.
I didn't know who desk had the switch. Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, I'd like you to turn to that Friday, June 1st, 2018 email on page .005 of Exhibit 3125. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And this is an email that you sent to Mr. Rosenberg that Friday evening, correct?
Yes.
And the subject line is Fortnite interoperability and esports. True?
Yes.
And he wrote to Mr. Rosenberg, Dear Phil, Sony's interoperability restrictions have put both of our companies in an untenable position, adversarial to our customers. Many Fortnite players are kids, and their friendships are being torn apart by Sony's segregation of players on competing platforms. That's what you told Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
And what you meant by that was that friendships are being torn apart by Sony's segregation of players on competing platforms, is that without crossplay, these friends would not be able to play Fortnite together, correct?
Correct. The PlayStation players could not play in a game session together with their friend on Xbox.
But again, Apple, as one of those competing platforms, permitted cross-platform play at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
And this was just a month and a half or so after the public launch of Fortnite on iOS, correct?
Correct.
And on the next line, you say, frankly, we do not believe Sony's position is even legal. True?
Yes.
That's something that you said to Mr. Rosenberg on June 1, 2018?
Yes.
And this was all before Sony invested $450 million in Epic, correct?
Just approximately 2 years before.
Thank you. Now, Sony ultimately agreed to cross-platform play in approximately September 2018?
Yes.
So 2 or 3 months after this email was sent?
Yes, my recollection is after this conversation ensued and we had reached a verbal agreement on the principles that Sony would support this. And this, Sony would spend several months developing a new policy, supporting it, and we entered into the formal contract. Sony specified that policy approximately 2 months later.
And part of that, of course, was the provision in that contract that provided if the cross-play equation skewed one way, that Sony would be entitled to more than 30%, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, Epic has made some payments to Sony under that provision, hasn't it?
Yes.
Now, while Sony finally agreed to cross-platform play, it has never agreed to permit cross-wallet transactions, correct?
That's correct.
Up to this very day, correct?
Yes.
Even as a partial owner of Epic Games, correct?
Yes.
And so it's for the PlayStation, V-Bucks bought within the PlayStation Store cannot be used outside of the PlayStation, correct?
That's right.
And similarly, V-Bucks bought outside of the PlayStation Store cannot be used inside the PlayStation version of Fortnite, correct?
Correct.
Now, Nintendo, maker of the Switch, also refuses to permit cross-wallet functionality, correct?
Yes.
So with the Nintendo Switch, players cannot use V-Bucks purchased outside of the Nintendo transaction platform on Switch, correct?
Correct.
And as the Switch, Nintendo will not let V-Bucks purchased from or through the Nintendo transaction platform to be used on any other gaming device, correct?
I'm not sure if Nintendo prohibits that, but Epic does not support it.
Okay, so that doesn't happen in any event on Nintendo Switch, correct?
Correct.
But Apple has never imposed any restrictions on cross-wallet transactions, correct?
No.
Now, Mr. Sweeney, in your opinion, console makers generally do exercise a monopoly on distribution of purely digital games with respect to their platforms, right?
Generally, I'm aware of one exception.
Okay. One exception to that monopoly?
I understand that Nintendo allows Switch games to be sold by at least one third-party retailer digitally.
Other than that, one exception, you believe that the console makers generally do exercise a monopoly on distribution of purely digital games with respect to their platforms, right?
Yes.
New topic. Mr. Sweeney, you're familiar with an organization called the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences?
Yes.
It's an organization with about 30,000 members. That sounds right to you?
I'm sorry, I don't know the membership.
I haven't made the count lately, I understand. That's an organization of video game industry professionals, though, isn't it?
Yes.
And every year, it holds an event called the DICE Summit.
Yes.
And DICE, as I understand it, stands for Design, Innovate, Communicate, and Entertain.
Sorry, I don't know.
Well, I guess I've researched that one a little harder than you have, sir. But that academy does have a Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes.
And in 2012, you were inducted into the Hall of Fame of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, right?
Yes.
Belated congratulations. And you were honored at the summit that year, weren't you?
Yes.
And you gave a speech?
Yes.
And the topic or title of that speech was Technology and Gaming in the Next 20 Years. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the title.
Would you agree the subject matter was about the future of gaming?
I'm not certain. I have given at least 2 talks at DICE summits. I'm not sure I'm recalling which is which.
Fair enough. Well, sir, Exhibit 3768 is a transcript that we had generated from the video of the speech that you gave the year that you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, which was 2012. Your Honor, we do have that video on a thumb drive for the record, and we would like to play a brief excerpt from that, which is at page 26, lines 1 to 23 of the transcript that is with the court.
Okay, and this is 3768?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, proceed.
Thank you. Matt?
At the same time, we have a lot of platforms coming together.
Could you wait?
Tablet platform.
I'm trying to figure out what the court reporter is going to do here. At first, I thought it would be easy, but what I'd like to do is relieve the court reporter of her obligation to transcribe, given how fast it sounds like he is talking, and the parties are instructed to provide the court reporter with that portion of the transcript. She will append that portion of the transcript to the end of the trial transcript. Any objection?
None here, Your Honor.
All right. Court reporters,
No objection.
court reporters relieved. All right. You may proceed.
Let me start over, Matt.
And at the same time, we have a lot of platforms coming together. There are the tablet platforms, there are the smartphone platforms and computers, PC and Macintosh, and then there are consoles, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Wii, and some new handheld dedicated gaming devices, and God knows what else. There's too many platforms. And we're seeing now iPad sales have surpassed the sales of desktop PCs. Right? That's a real revelation to me. This is a product that wasn't invented until a few years ago, and it's basically supplanting the personal computer industry as we know it. Over time, these platforms will be winnowed down into a much smaller set of competing platforms. There might be 1 or 2, maybe 3 winners worldwide across everything: computers, game platforms, smartphones. So we should expect a lot of consolidation here, and winners and losers according to who picks the right directions and executes successfully on them.
And Mr. Sweeney, first of all, you recognize this as a speech that you gave at DICE?
Yes, I don't remember the context. This is exactly the speech I gave that year.
Thank you, sir. And in 2012, in that speech, you stated that, in your view, there were too many gaming platforms, correct?
Are you going to use those words?
Let's go ahead and take a look at page 26 of Exhibit 3768. You say at line 8, this is too many platforms. Do you see that?
Yes.
And do you agree now that in this speech you said that there were too many platforms as of 2012?
Yes.
And you were referring to gaming platforms, correct?
I think I was referring to computing platforms.
Yeah. And you believed that the field of these platforms would sort itself out through competition, correct?
Yes.
What the slide behind you in that speech referred to as the platform war, true?
Yes.
Today, just as in 2012, there are smartphone platforms, correct?
Yes.
And PCs.
Yes.
And Macs.
Yes.
Various gaming consoles, correct?
Yes.
And some handheld gaming devices as well.
Yes. And
of course, the tablets that kind of amazed you back in 2012 are now everywhere, true?
Yes, they're far more common now.
And they're not just iPads, as you talked about in your 2012 speech, are they?
With Android and Microsoft Windows tablets also.
So things like Microsoft Surface, correct?
Yes.
And then when we say Android, we really mean to cover a whole broad number of tablets generated or created by other companies, correct?
Yes.
Such as Samsung's Galaxy Tabs, true?
Yes.
And there's the Amazon Fire, correct?
I'm not familiar with the Amazon Fire.
And Lenovo has smart tabs?
I'm not sure.
And of all these various computing platforms that we just talked about, today, almost everyone has more than one of these devices in their home, correct?
Well, certainly not. There are, I think, more people in the world than any consumer computing devices, in my understanding.
All right, sir, but let's stick within the United States and talk about people that play Fortnite. You believe that people that play Fortnite tend to have access to more than one computing device, correct?
I think some do.
A significant percentage, true?
I don't know the percentage.
You don't know what? The percentage? Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Sweeney, before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to make sure we have a clear record. Apple does, and going back now to Apple's policy regarding cross-wallet transactions, you would agree, wouldn't you, that Apple has never restricted cross-wallet play at any time while Fortnite was on iOS? True?
I think my recollection is that Apple policy didn't mention cross-wallet transactions until sometime in late 2018. And prior to that, I think the guidelines were silent on it, but in all of our discussions with Apple, Apple was fine with cross-wallet transactions.
And from March 2018 forward, Apple's permitted cross-wallet transactions on iOS for Fortnite, correct?
Yes.
Now, one of the ways that all of these different platforms compete in the gaming area is through the tools that they offer developers, correct?
I don't think that these platforms compete to limited and different extents among each other. They each offer tools.
Yeah. Now, as a member of the Apple Developer Program, Epic had access to the developer tools that were developed by Apple, right?
Yes.
And as we discussed yesterday, Unreal Engine still does, correct?
Yes.
And Unreal Engine uses those tools to assist developers in creating apps that can be used in the iOS environment, correct?
Yes.
And since joining the Apple Developer Program in 2010, Epic has worked with thousands of different Apple APIs and tools, right?
Referring to individual function calls within these APIs, I believe so.
And one example of those APIs is one called Metal, right? Are you familiar with Metal?
Yes.
And that is one of the APIs that Epic has used?
Yes.
That's a graphics API?
Yes.
And it contributed to Epic's ability to efficiently build a top-quality iOS version of... Yes. Do you need to slow down? Okay. No worries, no worries. And the API called Metal contributed to Epic's ability to efficiently build a top-quality version of Fortnite for iOS, right?
Yes.
And if you could look, please, sir, at Exhibit 3098.
DX 309.
Your Honor, apologies. DX 3098. Your Honor, while Mr. Sweeney is looking at that, could I please move DX 3768 into evidence?
Any objections?
Mr. Dice?
That's a
Yes.
speech.
Yeah, no objection, Your Honor.
I submitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mr. Sweeney, have you had an opportunity to review Exhibit DX 3098?
Yes.
And do you recognize this as an internal email string at Epic?
Yes.
From May 2018?
Yes.
And the ray line is quotes for WWDC. Do you see that?
Yes.
And what does WWDC stand for?
Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference.
And this May 11th, 2018 email is just weeks after the public launch of Fortnite on iOS, correct?
Yes.
Perhaps days.
Yes.
And Apple asked if Epic would be willing to provide a quote about its impressions of Metal for use at Apple's WWDC, correct?
Yes.
And at the bottom of page 1, carrying over to page 2, there's an email from you on May 9 where you say more, and then at the top there's a paragraph in italics. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you wrote that?
I think I did.
Good. And what you wrote here, Mr. Sweeney, is Metal gave us the injection of performance required for shipping the full Fortnite, Battle Royale experience on iOS quickly with no compromises. Does that mean compromises?
Yes, this is a misspelling.
Sure. And then you go on to say, porting a game built for high-end gaming consoles to iOS was a greatly superior experience with Metal than OpenGL. Correct?
Yes.
And did you mean that when you wrote that?
Absolutely.
And what is OpenGL?
OpenGL is a multi-platform graphics API.
And OpenGL can be used to or was being used at that time in particular for graphics on Android devices?
Yes, and previously, before Metal, it was used on iOS devices.
So this was an improvement created by Apple through its innovation that benefited Epic, correct?
Yes.
And OpenGL was also used on other platforms during this period aside from Android devices, true?
Yes.
And Metal was superior to OpenGL no matter what platform OpenGL was being used on, true?
At this time, I believe Metal only existed on iOS, so it could not be compared on other platforms.
And if we go back to the exhibit, sir, Josh Adams includes then a second quote immediately above yours on page 1. Do you see that?
Yes.
And who is Mr. Adams?
He is a senior programmer at Epic with skill.
And Mr. Adams' quote says, "We've been making use of Metal on iOS since its release in 2014 to great effect. A fast, agile, feature-rich, API-like Metal is exactly what we need to bring a game designed for modern consoles and desktops to the battery-powered iPhone and iPad. As a developer, it blows away OpenGL in every way. We were able to get Fortnite ship-ready on iOS in a handful of months as we weren't hindered by graphics." Do you see that?
Yes.
And do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
And in fact, immediately above that, you wrote on May 9th, "I like yours the best. Let's give both to Apple and let them mix and match and attribute as they like." That's what you said in response to Mr. Adams?
Yes.
And you did, in fact, like his quote, the best?
Yes.
And Mr. Sweeney, I would like to show you what has been marked. Let me back up. Now, I'm not sure if I have done this, so let me do this now. I would ask to move DX3098 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
And, Your Honor, I would next like to show the witness DX4036. And may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney, I have handed you what has been marked as exhibit DX4036. Have you had a chance to review it? Of course.
Yes.
Do you recognize this to be an email exchange between you and Mr. Spencer at Microsoft in January 2018?
Yes.
And in the bottom email on January 9th, you write to Mr. Spencer, stating in the second paragraph, "We're bringing Fortnite Battle Royale to iOS and Android in late February." Do you see that?
Yes.
And in fact, as you already told us, it went into beta testing in March, correct?
Yes.
And then you go on to say, not a dumbed-down version, but the full experience, correct?
Yes.
And was that a true statement when you made it to Mr. Spencer in January 2018?
Yes.
And in the next paragraph, in the second sentence, you said, "We want to work with Microsoft to unblock all console-mandated interop restrictions in time for this launch. I'm confident we'll achieve this with the other guys, and at any rate, platforms that block interop will be siloed." Again, does this refer to Microsoft's hesitance to provide the cross-platform play that you knew that Apple was about to?
Okay, can you repeat that?
Sure. Was this a reference to Microsoft's current unwillingness to agree to cross-platform play?
Microsoft's position at this time was ambiguous. Microsoft did not have a very clear position. They often spoke publicly in support of cross-platform. I think wanted to eliminate the ambiguity with Microsoft over the cross-platform policies.
And part of that ambiguity was it wasn't happening, correct?
Correct, it wasn't happening.
And so you wanted to solve the ambiguity by getting them to agree to do it, correct?
Yes.
And you used the fact that Apple was bringing a version of Fortnite online on iOS to motivate Microsoft to permit cross-platform, correct?
Epic was bringing Fortnite to iOS.
Thank you. If I misspoke, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. But you agree?
Yes.
And you knew that would motivate Microsoft because it did not want to be less relevant by being cut out of cross-platform play that included platforms like iOS, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, in Mr. Spencer's email at the top, in the fourth paragraph, he states, "Net is, I want to work this through with you. I wish we had more time to work through the iOS and Android scenario. Sounds like we basically have 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know how we get ahead of this in the future. I think we've been partners on Fortnite, so hopefully we can collaborate on roadmaps more going forward." And in fact, Mr. Spencer was concerned about how to coordinate with you in light of the iOS launch that was coming up in a few weeks, correct?
Yes.
So I would ask you, please, just to turn back to Exhibit DX3125 for a moment. You'll recall that this is the email from June 2018 in which you are asking Sony to agree to cross-platform play, correct?
Yes.
It's the email in which you said, frankly, we do not believe Sony's position is even.
Welcome to AT&T's teleconference service. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. To join the conference as the host, press star. Otherwise, press pound. At the tone, please speak your name. There are 169 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as a participant. For a menu of available commands, press star pound. Your connection is now in listen-only mode.
Mr. Sweeney, are you familiar with a publication, I believe it's an online publication called Eurogamer?
Yes.
And what is Eurogamer?
It's a website, possibly with an accompanying magazine covering the topic of gaming in Europe, I believe focused on console and PC.
And have you been interviewed by Eurogamer in the past?
Yes.
And if you could please take a look at Exhibit DX3199. And this is a version of Eurogamer from March 21, 2019.
Yes.
And sir, do you remember giving the interview reflected in this version of Eurogamer?
I need a minute.
Of course.
Yes, I generally remember.
Okay. And first of all, Your Honor, I would move Exhibit DX3199 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Again.
And Mr. Sweeney, in the initial paragraph, the interviewer makes clear that one of the topics to be addressed in the interview is the Epic Games Store. But he also asks in the first question, the big talking point this week has been Google Stadia. You've obviously been briefed and are very involved in it. What's your take on it? And Google Stadia was a streaming service that was launched around March 2019, correct?
I thought for me it was a note in that time frame that would be available.
Thank you. And in your response, you say, I'm very excited. Unreal Engine fully supports it. We've been working with them on a technical capacity on this for a very long time. It's exciting to put 10 teraflops of computing power in front of every device of every size in the world. Is that a statement that you made in this interview in 2019?
Yes.
A streaming device, a streaming service functioning well can give even a small device extraordinary computing power since it's playing games off of a remote server, correct?
Yes, it enables any device to connect to a server with a lot of computing power.
And if you go down, please, to, and also, I'm sorry, sir, in Unreal Engine, your other company with the game engine was actually working on the technical capacity with Google, correct?
Yes.
And does it continue to work with Google on Stadia?
Yes.
You've been making progress over the last couple of years?
Unreal Engine has been continually supporting Stadia.
Unreal Engine, your other company with the game engine was actually working on the technical capacity with Google, correct?
Yes.
And does it continue to work with Google on Stadia?
Yes.
You've been making progress over the last couple of years?
Unreal Engine has been continually supporting Stadia.
And if we go down, sir, to the next statement, you state, we live in a multi-platform, multi-ecosystem world now. Is that a statement you made in 2019?
Yes.
And do you agree with that statement today?
Yes.
And you state we see heavy Fortnite engagement across multiple platforms, all these different stores and platforms. They need to connect together and support players playing across their favorite devices in their different ways. Is that a statement you made in 2019?
Yes.
And do you still agree with that statement today?
Totally.
And going down, sir, below the box, you see it says, the state of gaming changes over time, right? And we're all going to have to keep up. Is that a statement you made in 2019?
Yes.
And do you still agree with that statement today?
Yes.
Digital gaming is a very dynamic world, isn't it?
It changes over time.
And then, do you also agree, sir, that a great game will succeed wherever it's sold?
I recall that statement, but I don't remember the context in which I made it.
Well, if you look down here, sir, you're asked, it's encouraging for those looking to join the store too, I'm sure. Nine. The very last question and answer on that page.
Here I am referring to competition among PC game stores, yes.
Yes. And Mr. Sweeney, you say that the high number of initial users or visitors that your store had proves not that Epic Store is awesome, it's that games come first and that a great game will succeed wherever it's sold. It proves that developers have the real power in the industry and that where developers go, customers will go with them. Was that a statement that you made in 2019?
Yes.
And is that a statement you still agree with today?
Yes, in the context of the PC game and business.
I don't think I understand what you mean by that. So are you saying that great games in some other context will not succeed or will not drive success?
No, I was referring to competition among PC game stores, the Epic Game Store and Steam. The competition I was referring to was competition for PC gamers, game customers across PC game stores.
So my question is, does that mean that the opposite is true in other contexts for gaming?
It varies by platform, Your Honor.
So great games on different platforms